because I can see both sides. I really like A&M. I like what they've done up to this point. And I'm telling you, I really like LSU. I'm taking the Tigers. Hello and welcome. It's always college football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy, and we appreciate you being here today as we get ready to preview the Week 9 slate of college football. I can't believe we're here, but we have some intriguing games this weekend, including a bunch involving ranked versus ranked teams, some matchups that might, I guess, in the preseason when we looked at this week, a bunch of matchups that we're like, yeah, I don't know how that one's going to work out. But here we are. We fast forwarded to the end of October, and we got some games that have certainly, I guess, set up to live up to the billing, right? Teams that we would not have thought would be undefeated or ranked highly at this point are. And that's going to make life very interesting for some of these matchups. We always ask you, like, rate, and subscribe to the show wherever you get the show. We appreciate those of you that have left us a review the last couple weeks here on the Apple Podcast platform. And for those of you that are joining us via the ESPN College Football YouTube page, subscribe to that YouTube page. We appreciate it. It helps us out a lot, and hit that thumbs up button while you're here. All right. We always go in chronological order, so I'm not putting my game first. The game that we'll be calling is not first, but chronologically it makes the most sense. So we will start in the Meadowlands there in Rutherford, New Jersey, where the Notre Dame Fighting Irish will take on the Navy Midshipmen. Notre Dame taking on Navy. This is the 11th time that these two teams will meet, with both ranked in the AP poll, but just the second time in the last 45 years. Back in 2019, both were ranked, and Notre Dame went on to win convincingly 52-20. And the Fighting Irish are 7-2-1 when both teams are ranked, with Navy's last win coming in the matchup just, a little over 65 years ago. That was in 1957. So we'll start with this. Before we get into our questions, like we always ask, how many of y'all have watched this Navy offense? Now, head coach for the Navy Mids, Coach Newberry's done a great job. Wanted to be a little different, not your traditional wing tee, not your traditional veer, not that triple option stuff that we've seen forever. They still have that stuff, but it's not exclusively what they do. So they went out and they looked at a bunch of different coordinator possibilities. They decided to bring in Drew Cronick, who over the last 20 years has been creating a hybrid. They've called it a millennial version of the wing tee. And it blends all the things that Navy's always done well, the triple option stuff, with spread principles. So it's pretty fun to watch, and I think it's one that if you are unfamiliar, you'll enjoy when you tune in noon Eastern on ABC. Sean McDonough, myself, and Molly McGrath will have the call. Navy actually leads the FBS in pre-snap movement. They do it on 76% of their offensive plays. Their quarterback, Blake Horvath, is one of two FBS quarterbacks with double-digit passing touchdowns and rushing touchdowns this season. The other is Jalen Milroe, and they have a couple of guys that will be around the ball offensively that are really, really good. Alex Tezka has 7 rushing touchdowns and a receiving touchdown. He's the fullback. He'll line up, but like I told you, he can split out and play wide receiver now with how they've kind of opened things up. And Eli Heidenreich, he has 5 receiving touchdowns. They were actually, both those guys were high school teammates at Mount Lebanon High School in Pittsburgh. So they've known each other since the first grade. These two guys are the stars, alongside Blake Horvath, there for the Navy Mids. Really fun to watch these guys. It's a lot of fun to operate. Let's get into the questions that will ultimately decide the game. Question number 1. Can Navy create big plays? We know that Notre Dame's really good, a really stout unit. And if you think that Navy's just going to snap the ball and just matriculate their way down the field, I just think that's a fool's errand. They have a significant talent disadvantage along the front, which means you're going to have to manufacture some big ones. And we've seen Navy play against talented teams this year. That was against Memphis, the most talented team they faced. They pulled out all the stops, double passes, throwbacks, halfback sweep passes, jet sweeps, misdirection. I mean, they've had to have run 6 or 7 plays that would be considered tricky So can they create some big ones against a team that is even more talented than the one they saw in Memphis? The good news is Navy has been pretty good at creating some of these big plays, both on the ground and through the air. Navy has 8 plays of 50-plus yards this season. The only FBS team with more is Boise State. So they've done a pretty dang good job when it comes to creating big plays. Another thing about Navy, too, is they can throw it now. Horvath's average pass traveled, ADOT, if you will, the average depth of target, is 12.2 yards downfield, and 28% of his passes travel 20-plus yards. So they're going to air it out, and they're not afraid to take some chances. Question number 2, can Notre Dame win at the line of scrimmage? So we know that Notre Dame's an attacking defense. I mean, they are pressuring opponents with great regularity. 44% of opponents' dropbacks this season have come under pressure. That's top 6 in the FBS, and it's on pace to be the best that Notre Dame's had since ESPN began tracking advanced statistics like this in 2011. Now, Navy, we know that they've struggled at times against a defense like this. They've been held under 200 yards just 4 times at the start of the 21 season. 2 of those 4 were against Notre Dame. So it'll be really interesting to see the talent advantage in favor of the Irish. Will Navy neutralize that at all? And they can do it by scoring touchdowns in the red zone, which takes us to question number 3. Can Navy win in the red zone? That's where they've been excellent this year. Excellent, really good. Scored on all 23 of their red zone penetrations. But what's most remarkable is that of those 23 scores, 22 were touchdowns. That's 96% touchdown efficiency, which is number 1 in the FBS. Notre Dame, by the way, has been pretty good as well. They're 6th in the FBS. And even though Navy's given up a bunch of yards between the 20s, they've been pretty good when that defense has its back against the wall. The defense is allowing a touchdown on just 42% of opponents' drives. That is tied with Cincinnati for a top 10, 9th best red zone efficiency on defense. So, and Notre Dame, by the way, top 13, which is a big area of improvement for the Irish over the last couple of years. 2 more questions here. Can Navy win the turnover battle? I think they're going to have to. If you look at how they've gone about things, they've done a pretty good job. They've won the turnover battle in 5 straight games, and they're probably going to have to do it again this week. Since Brian Newberry became the head coach, Navy is plus 23 in turnover margin. That's the best in the FBS over the last 2 years. And then finally, number 5, will Notre Dame just pound the football? I mean, they have a great 2-headed monster at running back with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. You got Riley Leonard, who also likes to contribute with his legs as well. So can Notre Dame just pound it? I think back when I think of matchups like this, I always revert back to when Cincinnati played against Alabama in the semifinal game there in 2021. Alabama just time and time again would just pound it. I mean, the first 12 plays, I feel like, were Brian Robinson off tackle, inside zone, mid zone, outside zone, just right downhill, gap trap, power. You name it, they just pounded the football because there was such a significant size advantage and there was a depth advantage in favor of the Tide. Will that come to fruition here for Notre Dame with all the different pieces they have offensively that can run the football? A couple trends in the game. Navy, 6 straight games have gone over the total. That's tied for the 2nd longest active streak in the FBS. And Notre Dame is 11-2 against the spread against ranked teams since 2022. That is the best in the FBS. I thought everyone said Marcus Freeman couldn't win big games. Well, 11-2 against spread is pretty dang good. 22-7 against the spread against ranked teams since 2018. That is also the best in the FBS. I will not be picking the game, but I will be fascinated by the game. I think it's one of the great stories of the college football season to have Navy at this point of the season undefeated, and then Notre Dame on the heels of a 5-game winning streak playing for a chance to get into the playoff conversation. Should be fascinating. It's noon Eastern on ABC. Game number 2 that we will break down. This is Saturday, 3:30 Eastern time. Another ranked matchup. The 20th ranked Fighting Illini of Illinois head to Eugene, Oregon. They are number 1 in college football. Oregon has been great at home, dating all the way back to 2017. We know that they are 45-3 there in Autzen Stadium since 2017. So they've had it rocking and rolling. Look, this is the first time, though, that Illinois will play the AP number 1 ranked team since 2007. They actually won that game. That was against Ohio State. But it's the 16th time in program history that the Illini have played the top-ranked team, and they're 3-12 in their previous 15 games. They have wins in 1950, 1956, and 2007. 50 in 2007 was Ohio State. 56 was against Sparty and Michigan State. Some questions in the game. Question 1, can Illinois run the football and shorten the game? Most teams that line up against, say, Michigan, which, by the way, was one of the best rushing defenses in the country going into last week, most teams line up and they say, yeah, we're probably not going to be able to take it to them on the ground. Probably not going to happen. Michigan's not going to be able to, we're not going to be able to run the ball on them. Just not going to happen. So let's prep for some things where we win some one-on-ones and maybe we motion, we catch them off balance, we create a big play or two, and that's the way you beat the Wolverines. Well, that wasn't the case last week. Illinois, they had entered the game having not been super committed to running the football. They really hadn't. They had kind of entered the game utilizing the run, but not living and dying by the run like most Brett Bielema teams have been in the past. Well, they finished the game with 187 rushing yards. That's the most that Michigan has allowed in the last 2 seasons, and that was without Illinois' starting running back Caden Fagan. So he had season-ending hip surgery last week. So to be able to run the football, knowing that you're without your top option, is pretty dang impressive. Now, a couple of things to note in the game. They did have a fake punt that resulted in 36 rushing yards. Luke Altmaier did scramble a few times for some big games. So, yeah, maybe it's not all in the traditional sense, but I think running the football is something that will be beneficial for the Illini as they go into this game, if they can. Question 2, will Oregon's offense continue to take flight? We know Dylan Gabriel's been outstanding and has emerged so far over the last few weeks as a Heisman contender. Now, I do have question marks about whether he can stay patient if the defense forces him to keep everything underneath, because I know I've been calling Dylan Gabriel games for as long as I can remember. I'm at least studying him, dating back to his time at UCF. Like, the guy wants to take shots downfield. Like, he wants to push the ball downfield. And as a result, they've been outstanding, right? 3rd in the Big Ten in points per game, 4th in yards per game, 3rd in pass yards per game, and 9th in rush yards per game. So they have been rolling right now, Oregon has offensively. They have great playmakers. We've known about Tez Johnson's influence on the offense since the beginning of the year, but the last couple weeks we found out that Evan Stewart doesn't plan on taking the back seat anymore. 27 receptions, 427 yards, and 3 touchdowns is what has been kind of compiled the last few weeks, but more than a third of those came against Ohio State just a few weeks ago. Jordan James has been awesome, over 700 yards rushing, and he also has just 121 carries. So he's probably feeling pretty fresh at this point while contributing 8 touchdowns on the ground as well. So will Oregon's offense continue to play at a ridiculously high level? Question 3, Illinois' simplified defensive approach, will it continue to pay dividends? Now, Illinois' defense the last couple weeks, after allowing 46 points after halftime to Purdue, they looked like they had a little bit too much on their plate. It looked like they maybe tried to do a few too many things, a few too many adjustments, tried to dictate a little bit too much. And it seems like the whole defensive staff has said, hey, guys, like, we got to simplify things a little bit. Maybe we're doing a little too much. Well, they went back to the drawing board, head into the Michigan game, and they hold Michigan into 114 rushing yards, forced 3 turnovers, and had 5 sacks. So maybe this watered-down version of what Illinois has been has allowed their players to play a little faster. And as a result, the production has skyrocketed. They do have a star. They have an excellent player in Gabe Lucas, who was phenomenal from the edge last week, a career-high 13 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and a forced fumble, while also adding 7 quarterback pressures. So he's a guy to keep in mind when watching this Illinois defense. He's a guy that can and will take over the game if you allow them. Question number 4, Can Illinois turn Oregon over? Illinois forced 3 turnovers against Michigan, 2 fumbles and a pick, which came after 2 straight games where Illinois did not force a turnover, and just 1 turnover, that interception at Nebraska, in the last 3 games. So they had gone really 3 straight games with very limited influence and not great field position. So you look at those turnovers, that's going to be huge when playing against a team that's as talented and as well coached as the Oregon Ducks. Couple trends in the game. Illinois has covered in 6 straight as an underdog. That is tied with Northern Illinois for the longest active streak in the FBS. I will take Oregon in the game. It does feel like a lot of points, I must add. It does feel like a lot of points, but I just think Oregon's operating at a different level right now than the rest of the Big Ten, at least when they are in Autzen Stadium, which is clearly very friendly confines. Moving on to number 21, Missouri Tigers taking on the 15th ranked Alabama Crimson Tide. This will be Saturday, 3:30 Eastern time on ABC. Couple things. These guys don't have like a long track record, by the way. Missouri, a new member of the SEC. Alabama, a standing foundational member of the SEC. They've only played each other 7 times. It's not like there's this long storied history here between the 2 programs, but the last time they played was in 2020. It was the first game of the year. It was at Missouri, and Missouri did a pretty good job of making the offense a little uncomfortable that day. Mac Jones and company, they scored 38, but it was not a comfortable 38 if you go back and take a peek at it. Let's go to the questions that will determine this outcome. Question 1, can Jalen Milroe get back on track? He's thrown multiple interceptions in consecutive games for the first time in his career. He now has 6 picks. That's the most he's ever had in a season. He had 6 last year in the entire 2023 campaign. Over the last 3 games, things have kind of struggled. If you look at the inaccuracies, some of the decision-making, the game management, it's led a lot of people to suggest that Jalen Milroe's injured. I don't know if he is or not. I really don't know. But I do know this. When I've watched him, he looked really comfortable and in command there in the first 3.5 games. I mean, getting the ball out on time, anticipating throws, being decisive, making sure his feet were underneath him as a thrower. And then when it wasn't there, he was escaping north and south, and he was becoming a runner faster than he did at any point last year. Remember last year, he held the ball longer than anybody in the Power 5. It was well over 3 seconds, and it resulted in a lot of pressures and him not necessarily always understanding when to cut his losses. Hey, throw it away, live to play second down. He took a lot of sacks as a result and got the team behind the sticks. Well, those things had gone away in the first few games of the year, but they've started to come back just a little bit. A little indecisive, a little unwilling to take off, and trying to do maybe on occasion a little too much. So can he get back on track, staying within the offense, keeping his feet underneath him, letting his feet talk to him with the accuracy issues that have plagued him a few times in the last few games? So hoping that that can happen for him. Question number 2, will Missouri be able to apply pressure and affect Jalen Milroe? The last few weeks, Jalen Milroe is getting pressure on about 47% of his dropbacks. Now, some of those are on him, and some of those are on the offensive line. The right side has been very inconsistent, whereas the left side has been rock solid. But they have seen an increased level of blitzing from the opposition the last few weeks as well. Milroe saw blitzes on 28% of his dropbacks in the first 4 games of the year, since teams have been blitzing Alabama 40% of the time. That's the highest rate in the SEC and the 8th highest rate in the FBS. This has resulted in 9 sacks, including 3 against Tennessee last Saturday in Neyland. On the season as a whole, Milroe has not been elite when diagnosing the blitz. His completion percentage when blitzed drops 14 points, and it doesn't appear like when he snaps the ball, there's a plan sometimes. He's such a great athlete. He's so dynamic, but when teams overload the protection, you sometimes just have to beat that rush by getting the ball out really quickly, and that is not yet a step that he's taken with great consistency. So will Mizzou blitz Jalen and try to make things difficult for him? Because Mizzou, dating back to their time when Blake Baker was the defensive coordinator, they're an aggressive group. Like, they want to throw heat at you and make the quarterback's life very difficult. Question number 3, how healthy is Brady Cook. And frankly, going a little further, how healthy is Missouri overall? Now, it's been documented that Brady Cook left the game last Saturday against Auburn. He went to the hospital, allegedly. I don't know if he did or not. Eli Drinkwood said that he went to the hospital and he realized that he had 2.5 games left at 4-0 Field, so he decided to come back. I don't know. I don't know what's true and what's not, but I do know this. Him returning to the field, he looked a lot better than he did when he left. When he was rolled up on that right ankle, it didn't look good. It was the 6th offensive snap of the game. I went back and watched it 10 times. It did not look good. So it's something that's worth watching. It might be sore, and with it being as a right-handed passer, with it being your right ankle, it's going to have an impact on how much velocity you have throwing the football. Just think about it. Stand in a passing posture like this and look in the mirror and try to simulate throwing the football. Well, if your right ankle hurts, how hard can you push off that right foot to deliver the football? Think about it from a pitcher's perspective. If you're on the mound and my right foot is dug in right against, right on the top of the mound, and you're right against the rubber and you're dug in and you're having to push off that right foot, how hard can you throw if your ankle is unstable or if you are in pain? It's something worth monitoring. For a quarterback, the left leg, you can deal with that. It's not the end of the world. It's painful, especially as a runner, but it's not the end of the world. But for a right-handed quarterback, having your right ankle injured, that is something that is worth monitoring for sure. He was replaced by Drew Pine, who did not play well, completed just 10 of 21 for 78 yards. But when Cook came back into the game, his impact was felt not just from inaccuracy and efficiency, a managing of the game situation, but I think his impact was felt with the energy and the way that the place kind of was able to lift up, and he lifted the rest of the team up as a result. But he wasn't the only one that left the game last week injured. Nate Noel left the game last week. He's been one of the more dependable backs in the SEC. He's averaging about 6 yards a carry. So they have backs, they have depth at that position, but man, they got a bunch of injuries. This Missouri team is banged up. They are really banged up. So can they go on the road and play at a super high level against the Tide when they are at less than 100%? That will be something worth watching. Question 4, can they get Luther Burden going? Now, Luther Burden has not scored a touchdown in 3 straight games. It's the second longest streak of his career, behind a 5-game streak when he was a freshman back in 22. Now, despite having 10 targets last week, he only had 49 yards. So that's not great. He also, I don't feel like I've seen the same type of burst after the catch that we've seen from him at times in his career. So can they get Luther Burden going, whether it's on the verticals or on the catch and run stuff or on the things that would get him in space? That will be huge, because this is a young secondary. Tackling in the open field has at times been inconsistent, and getting Luther Burden out in the open field one-on-one with the corner would be beneficial to the Missouri Tigers. And question 5, can Bama run the football in a traditional sense? There are times I feel like with Alabama's offense, there is more that's there in the run game. I feel like there's more that the running backs can do. Now, are the running backs the equivalent of Derrick Henry? Not necessarily. But I think Jam Miller and Justice Haynes are perfectly capable backs to combine to have a really solid 1-2 punch in the SEC, especially with Milroe struggling a little bit right now, throwing the football and fitting into tight windows. Can they run the football and maybe get a little bit more attention paid by the defense to get near the box so they can open up some shots downfield, because that's where Milroe's been at his best in the past. So can Bama get the run game going against a defense that's very active and that's not afraid to be aggressive? A couple trends in the game. Alabama is 15-1 straight up, but just 7-9 against the spread after a loss since 2010. They have 3 straight against the spread losses. The other thing about Bama, after a loss, the under is 12-3 in the games following. Missouri is 0-3 against the spread in the SEC this season, 3-1 against the spread in all other games. Only SEC team that is currently winless against the spread in conference play. I will take Alabama. I think Alabama bounces back in this game. I think there's still a lot to like with what they have from a personnel standpoint. I still think they can run the football, and I still think they have dynamic weapons that can create problems for the Missouri defense. And last week, too, I noticed Bama take a step defensively. I know it was in a losing effort, but it does appear like that group across the board played better than they had in the weeks prior. I'll take Bama. I think it'll be a nice bounce-back performance in Bryant-Denny. Another game, Saturday, 4:15 Eastern time on the SEC Network. It's the 5th-ranked Texas Longhorns traveling to Vandy, who is now in the top 25. This is Texas's 3rd straight week playing against an AP top 25 opponent, and it's their 4th of the season. Even though, should we still count Michigan? Like, come on. I know they were in the top 25 when they played, but goodness gracious alive. Like, come on. Question number 1. Will Quinn Ewers and the Texas offense get back on track? Now, last week, the offense had their worst outing of the entire season. 259 total yards, 3.5 yards a play, 2 for 14 on 3rd down, 29 net rushing yards, and 4 turnovers. But other than that, not too bad. So it's their worst offensive performance since that game a few years ago against TCU. Remember that game when they were held to under 200 yards and pretty much statistically speaking, burn the box score. You don't want to look at it. Not great. So it's been a while since we've seen them look that human. Quinn Ewers is taking a lot of heat, okay? Taking a lot of heat, understandably. The offense is going to go, and the perception of the offense is going to go based on what you think about the quarterback situation. And you look at the first few games, I mean, the guy was lights out, right? 58 of 79, 73% completion, 8-2 touchdown interception. But the last 2 weeks since coming back from injury, it hasn't been quite as good. We know he missed some time, but since returning, just 62% completion, and they've thrown interceptions in back-to-back weeks. So they got to take a little pressure off the passing game. I already referenced it. To run last week for just 29 yards. And I know sacks are a factor, right? I understand that in college football, sacks get put under the rushing total, but 1.1 yards per attempt on the ground is just not going to get the job done. I think Weisner's got a chance to be a really good player. I think Jaden Blue needs to get back involved. I'm not sure when he's going to get back involved, but at some point he will. I know he had a couple fumbles, but man, you got to take some of the pressure off the passing game. But you got to find a way to get Blue and Weisner involved because those guys are talented with the ball in their hands. Question 2, can Texas's defense contain Diego Pavia? He's one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the country. I know a lot of people have yet to really watch what Vanderbilt has done because they just think Vanderbilt and they think, yeah, same old Vanderbilt. I'm telling you, they're a different outfit this year. When your quarterback has already accounted for 1,800 total yards and 14 touchdowns, you know you're in a pretty good spot. This is a guy that has been playing in this offense with coordinator Tim Beck for years and years and years, dating back to their time together at New Mexico State. Diego Pavia is relentless. That's how I would describe him. If you haven't watched him, he is relentless. He'll run over ball carrier. He'll run over defenders as a ball carrier. He'll stiff arm folks. He'll talk noise the entire game. The guy just never gives up. He's like the honey badger, but playing the quarterback spot, all right? Pavia is the complete package. Love his leadership. Love how the team rallies around him. There's a certain ruggedness to the way he approaches the position, and the locker room really responds when he's on the field. So I think the guy, I know we talk often about prospects and, you know, this guy's a first rounder, this guy's a first rounder. Like, you tell me right now how many quarterbacks in the SEC you'd rather have playing college football than Diego Pavia. All right, the guy's super accurate. He does not miss throws, and he's also a super dynamic runner. So I think this is going to be a tough matchup for the Texas defense because this guy is the real deal. The other thing that makes Vandy really good is their pace of play. So question 3, can Vandy continue to slow it down? In their wins this year, they averaged 33.7 seconds per snap. That is the lowest or the highest in the FBS. Slowest, lowest, highest, whatever. It's the slowest in the FBS. 33.7 seconds per snap. That's time of possession, right? That's actual game clock. Now, do you realize that 33.7 seconds for every one play They average 63 offensive snaps a game. So 63 times 33.7. What does the time of possession look like when the averages work out in Vandy's favor? They are 5-0 this season when they win time of possession. They are 0-2 when they lose it. So a magic number here, as backwards as this may be, as we live in the world of tempo offenses, 30 minutes. If Vandy eclipses the 30-minute mark as far as time of possession is concerned, then I would be very concerned if I were the Texas Longhorns. Now, those numbers are really beneficial, and it actually makes Vandy's defense look a whole heck of a lot better. So if they can slow things down offensively and just kind of junk it up and string together some drives, Vandy's pass rush and their cornerback play, we're not talking about high-level SEC caliber players. Now, the linebackers, they struggle in coverage. They have given up a lot of plays to opposing tight ends. I wouldn't want to give up a lot of plays to Gunnar Helm. Now, they do have, I think, pretty good guys on the interior of their defense. I think their safeties are rock solid. But Vandy's best defense is their offense playing slow and possessing the football. Question 4, can Vandy continue to dominate on third down? In their wins, they convert 58% of their third downs and 100% of their fourth downs. Now, fourth down, 100%, a little misleading. They've only gone for it twice, but they're 2 for 2, including one big one against Alabama that resulted in a touchdown on what looked like it was a broken play. Against Alabama and against Kentucky, their 2 biggest wins of the year, they were 12 of 18 and 8 of 13 respectively on third down. So what did we just talk about? Pace, time of possession. You can control pace and time of possession by stringing together third down conversions. And then question 5, does Texas have a penalty problem? Now, penalties committed this year by Texas on the offensive side is a real problem. Now, they had 8 penalties on offense against Mississippi State. They had 7 against Michigan. 32 of their 45 penalties in the first 7 games of the season have come on offense. And what's most troubling is that 17 of those 32 are false starts. That means on average, they are having more than 2 false starts per game. Well, against Georgia, it was worse. They had 4 false starts, which killed 4 different drives. And one in particular took them from a 1 yard to go to a 6 yard to go conversion down. And we know the odds on short yardage as compared to 4th and 6, very, very different. A couple trends in the game. Vandy is 4-0 against the spread as an underdog this season. That's tied with Illinois for the most covers without and against the spread loss in the FBS. And Texas is 5-1 against the spread in their last 6 games following a loss. I will take Texas in the game, but I think Texas, their antenna's got to be up for this. You cannot think that you're just going to roll in and play little old Vandy and run them out of the gym. Vandy is legit. They are real. And if you want to allow them to stay in the game, you're going to find out. So if I'm Texas, I start fast and I don't let up, because Vandy is not the type of team that you want to have hanging around. So I'll take Texas, but my goodness, man, that is not a team I want to be playing fresh off me having my heart ripped out. The 8th-ranked LSU Tigers will take on the Texas A&M Aggies from College Station. This will be 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. LSU leads the all-time series here, 36-23-3, with the first meeting coming all the way back in 1899. Now, A&M in Kyle Field has been much better. They are 10-4-1, including winning the last 3 games in College Station. Couple questions in the game. Number 1, will LSU take some pressure off the passing game by running the football? It's no secret what LSU does best. They have great quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier. They have elite weapons on the perimeter. They have a really good offensive line when it comes to pass protection. But what they haven't done a great job of is run the ball consistently. They haven't even really tried it, to be honest with you. They've run the ball on just 39% of their offensive snaps. That is 115th in the sport. They also, at just 28 attempts per game, is the lowest in the SEC. So they've been really up and down. Now, they are not without talent at running back. They have good, solid running back contributions. Problem is, he's a freshman. Caden Durham, he ran for 101 against Arkansas, did have 3 touchdowns, did have some big moments against South Alabama, had a big moment against South Carolina a few weeks ago, but he hasn't been as much a part of the offense at times this year. He's kind of disappeared at times. Well, the Aggies, they've allowed one player to rush for multiple touchdowns in the last 2 seasons, and that was Quinshon Judkins. So can LSU run the football against a really stout front? That'll be a fascinating conversation to have. Question 2, if they can't run it, will they win some one-on-ones? Now, we know about Kyron Lacey and how often he gets targeted. The guy's amazing. Won the game against Ole Miss. Has constantly stepped up to the task over and over and over again this year. He'll be working against Will Lee in press coverage. Those two, I would imagine they're going to get to know each other. Lacey's a really strong, physical, sure-handed wide receiver that is not at all afraid to try to post up on opposing defenders. The one guy that I think is consistently being underrated is Aaron Anderson. Now, he's averaging more per reception than Kyron Lacey, but is extremely explosive. He plays in the slot an awful lot, and if he gets one-on-ones against nickel defenders, like, he can crush you. So Aaron Anderson there in the slot is a guy that A&M is going to need to account for. And then to make life even more difficult, Mason Taylor. He's a big target. He's good on the checkdowns. He's very reliable on 3rd down and in the red zone. So keep an eye on Mason Taylor, who has really good length as well. They love him. They absolutely love him. So A&M, what they do is they just stay deep and they force you to just take the underneath stuff. Just dink and dunk and dink and dunk, which is why I think Mason Taylor has a chance in this game to be really impactful. Question 3, how much has LSU's defense improved? Now, if they get you behind the chains, we know they're really good. I think they have 2 guys along the line of scrimmage that will occupy the end spot in Braden Swinson, number 4, and Savion Jones, number 35. Those guys can breathe fire off the edge. They'll move him around, and sometimes they'll slide him inside and all these other things for sure. But those 2 guys could take over the game if you let them. But the other guy that has emerged in recent weeks is number 40. That's Whit Weeks. He is awesome. Yeah, you'll love watching this guy play regardless of what team you cheer for. Whit Weeks, his emergence the last few weeks has taken this defense to the next level. So keep an eye on him. And then the return of Zy Alexander has been massive. He's allowed just 6 completions on 18 targets this year. He has a couple pass breakups, a couple picks. He's now healthy, coming off a knee injury 11 months ago, and he's been playing his best football the last few weeks. So that's something worth watching. Can A&M create some opportunities against this defense, especially in the secondary and especially against the safeties, because that might be the liability for the LSU Tigers. Question 4, which Connor Wigman are we going to get? Now, we have seen Connor Wigman absolutely crush opponents, but we have seen Connor Wigman kind of elevate and dissipate from time to time as well. Now, Wigman, he sprained his AC joint there against Notre Dame back in August. Underwhelming in that game prior to the sprain. He was just 12 for 30 for 100 yards and a couple picks. Well, he played against McNeese, aggravated it in practice a couple weeks later, and then decided to just be sidelined. Hey, let's heal up. Let's get things going. They put in another quarterback in Marcel Reed, who's a good fit for the system. He did an adequate job. And then Wigman's back to 100%. He starts against Mizzou, and I think he played the best game of his career. That game against Mizzou or the game against Miami last year, I know you'll look at the numbers and you'll think, oh, the numbers really weren't that impressive. If you watch the game and the throws that he was asked to execute against Miami, those are his 2 best performances in an Aggie uniform. Well, he was lights out against Mizzou. 82% completion. He was 18 of 22. Went for 276. Also added a few plays with his legs, had 5 carries for over 30 yards, and kind of allowing A&M to just cruise to a very easy 41-10 victory. And then you come back the following week against Mississippi State. He's 15 of 25, 217, and a couple picks. But there were a bunch of off-target throws as well. Now, there were some good moments. I mean, you look at some of the throws, like touchdown to Noah Thomas at times. Like, he's made some good throws this year, but it has been a little bit inconsistent. So if you get good wingmen, look out. But if you get bad wingmen, as far as decision-making is concerned, then this will be a different animal for LSU when taking on the Aggie offense, because we know the Aggies can run the football. Feel good about that. That group's really solid along the offensive line, and they got some backs that can take over the game. But if you have the quarterback thrown to the opposite team, that is something that I would be concerned about. And then question 5, can LSU protect Garrett Nussmeier? Now, A&M, their defense is really all about the pass rush. I mean, that's what they do best. That's why they play too high shell. That's why they don't let anything behind them, because they believe that if they just make you stay patient, their defensive line is eventually going to sack you, create a negative play. Next thing you know, you're off schedule, and then their antenna's up and they're coming after you. So they're not a team that's going to blitz you a lot. They're not a team that's going to try to do a lot of exotics. They're just going to line up and they're going to rush the quarterback. And if you look at the offensive line for LSU, there's a lot of teams that have tried to attack the right side. And because the left side is locked down. Dellinger at guard, Will Campbell at tackle, the left side's locked down. So you'll attack the center and you'll attack the right side. That's how people have been going about attacking LSU the last few weeks. So Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, all those guys, big point of emphasis for them to frustrate Garrett Nussmeier and to create some pressures there right up the middle so that things get uncomfortable for the outstanding quarterback. And then finally, the last question we'll ask here, who will draw first blood? Getting ahead early has been massive for A&M when playing in College Station. Since they joined the SEC back in 2012, they are 51-12 at home when scoring first, and they are just 10-11 when their opponent scores first. It's a really tough one to figure out because I can see both sides. I really like A&M. I like what they've done up to this point, and I'm telling you, I really like LSU. I'm taking the Tigers. I think they'll go to College Station. Garrett Nussmeier on the passing attack continues to be outstanding. I think he'll be smart with the football, and at this point, I just don't know what I'm going to get from the A&M passing attack, which will allow LSU to sell out against the run, and I'm not confident at this point that A&M will be able to take advantage of a secondary that at times has been a little up and down. Give me the Tigers and what I think has a chance to be kind of a low-scoring, grinded-out type of affair. Some more games that we're really paying attention to this weekend. Number 17, Boise State will take on UNLV from Las Vegas. It's Friday, 10:30 Eastern time. I'm looking forward to this game. Now, there's a battle between two G5 playoff contenders shaping up to a game that I think could be an absolute shootout. Wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. I think everybody's familiar with Ashton Genty. He's rushed for 100 in every game, 203 games, and has more yards than nearly 90 FBS teams. He's got 1,248 yards. There are only 37 teams that have more than him. Pretty impressive. Couple of key notes to consider here. UNLV, plus 12 in turnover margin. Boise State is plus 1. UNLV has blocked 4 punts. That's 2 more than anyone else, including 3 by their best receiver. That's Ricky White III. 2 of those 3 have been returned for touchdowns. A trend in the game. UNLV, 11-4 against the spread as an underdog since 2022. Second best in the FBS over that span. Only NIU, who's 10-2, is better. Boise has covered 5 straight conference games, tied for their longest active streak in the FBS. I'm taking UNLV in the game. It doesn't feel good. I can promise you that. But if you look at what UNLV has become since Haj Malik Williams has been thrust in the lineup as starting quarterback, they're better in pretty much every offensive statistical category. And they had it going against Syracuse. That's their lone loss. But now I think they get a chance to play someone that's on level footing. Give me the Rebels. Take care of business there in Las Vegas. Washington at Indiana. This will be a fascinating game. Saturday, noon Eastern time. Washington has won 11 of the last 12 games against ranked opponents. First look at Indiana without Curtis Rourke. He's been a revelation. Ohio transfer, perfect fit for this attack. He's now out for an extended period of time with a thumb injury that was operated on, which thrust Taven Jackson into the lineup. This guy's got a really high ceiling. He does have some starting experience. He's been okay in limited time this year, but he has in his career thrown 5 picks against just 2 interceptions in limited time last year. So it's his 3rd year in the program. So here's hoping he's a little bit more comfortable and he gets to go against a Washington team that's been a little shaky away from home. They are 0-2 in true road games and lost the last game played down the road on the either side of Seattle against Washington State. So, hey, something to keep an eye on. Indiana is covering by 16.6 points per game. That's the largest average cover margin in the FBS. Washington, however, is 3-0 against the spread on the road versus ranked teams since 2022. That's the most covers without a loss among program conference teams over that span. I'll take Indiana, but I think it's going to be close and uncomfortable there for the Hoosiers. Oklahoma's at number 18, Ole Miss. This is Saturday, noon Eastern time on ESPN. Ole Miss is a 3-touchdown favorite. My goodness, what has happened to the Sooners? Well, I can tell you what's happened. They lost Dylan Gabriel to Oregon. They weren't too worried about Jackson Arnold. They thought Jackson Arnold was going to come right in and just take off. Well, he struggled. They decided to bench him, even though if you look at the offensive line, they've been a problem. They have a receiver corps that's without most of their playmakers. So they go put Michael Hawkins in. Well, that didn't work out either. Just 9 snaps into the South Carolina game. They pulled the plug. Granted, there were 3 turnovers made in those 9 snaps. Put Jackson Arnold back in the game. Seth Luttrell has now been fired. He's the scapegoat for clearly what is an inept offense. I don't think it was all on him. I think it's the personnel. Well, Ole Miss, I think they're going to struggle at times against this Oklahoma defense, but I don't think Oklahoma is going to be able to move the ball at all against Ole Miss on the defensive side. So low-scoring game. Don't anticipate many points being scored in this one. Ole Miss, 6 straight games have gone under the total. That's the longest active streak in the FBS. I think it becomes 7. And Oklahoma, this would be their largest underdog role since 1997 at Texas Tech. They won that game, by the way, 32-21. So, little silver lining if you are the Sooners. But, man, it's been tough sledding for them so far. Nebraska's at number 4, Ohio State. This is Saturday, noon Eastern time. Ohio State is a healthy favorite, 3.5 touchdowns right now. Look, Ohio State might be hurting on the offensive line. I'll be watching that group pretty closely. The left side being without your left tackle is always a bit of a problem. But they've been pretty good. Haven't allowed a lot of sacks, haven't allowed a lot of tackles for loss. So it might take a little while to kind of get things revved back up after the bye week. But I think, hey, they'll weather the storm. I think Nebraska will have a nice start to the game. But after about 20-25 minutes, I wouldn't be surprised to see Ohio State turn on the Jets and pull away as things get going. Look, we know Nebraska's defense. They've had some problems in their losses. All right. On the year, the 2 losses came when the defense allowed more than 140 yards on the ground. I think Ohio State's going to get there. Ohio State is 10-4 against the spread with 10+ days off under Ryan Day. That's the 4th best cover percentage in that span. And Nebraska, 9 straight against the spread losses against ranked teams. That's the longest active streak in the FBS. If Indiana did to Nebraska what they did last week, I think Ohio State's going to do that and some. I think Ohio State wins this thing going away in the second half after what I think will be a spirited effort from the Cornhuskers there in the first 20 to 25 minutes. 3rd-ranked Penn State Nittany Lions travel to Wisconsin. This is 7:30 Eastern time. Penn State has won 5 straight in the series. Be careful. That's all I'm saying. Be careful because we know what's coming up next weekend, right? Like we know Penn State is going to play against Ohio State. They're in State College, and everyone's going to be super fired up about it, right? And we know that no one this week has been asking Penn State players about the Wisconsin game. I'm sure everybody's already making their plans for the game against the Buckeyes. Be careful. Really tricky spot. We have seen times where Penn State has been a little bit inept coming out of the bye week, like in 2018, 2019, 2021, 2022. Like we've seen them come out of the bye week and be a little sluggish. Would not be surprised if this game is close at halftime, but nobody has been more dominant in the 3rd quarter than Penn State this year. They have allowed just 3 points in the third quarter, and they have scored nearly 60. So wouldn't be shocked if this game's tight for the better part of a half. But the third quarter, that's where you got to watch Wisconsin. Can they make some hay at that point? Penn State is 5-0 against the spread against Wisconsin since 2012. That's their best against the spread record versus any team over that span. And they are 9-1 against the spread as a road favorite since 2022. That's the best in the FBS. Wisconsin, however, has been a giant killer. 22-10 ATS against top 5 teams since 1981. That's one of the best in the sport. I will take Penn State, but I think it's going to look a lot like the USC game a few weeks ago. Would not be surprised if it's sluggish. Would not be surprised if they come out and play poorly early, but I think they'll right the ship and find a way to win, but I would not lay the points in this one. Just feels very, very dangerous. Let's go next to number 22, SMU, who will take on the Duke Blue Devils. It's 8 o'clock Eastern time on, I believe it's the ACC network. The Mustangs are number 4 in scoring offense. That's 40.7 points per game. They allow just 20.6 points per game. That's number 3 in the ACC. That's one thing I don't think people talk enough about is SMU's defense. They're the toughest in the ACC against the run. They allow just 87 yards a game on the ground. That's 2.6 per carry. So that will be really interesting because on the other side, Duke, that's how they've won this year. They're allowing just 17 points a game. They lead the ACC in scoring defense, and they've given up just 6 passing touchdowns all season long. So what gives in this one? I think it'll be low scoring, shockingly enough. Duke, 5-1 against the spread as a double-digit underdog since 2022. It's tied for the best in the FBS over that span. And SMU is 9-17 as a road favorite since 2017. That's the second worst in the FBS over that span behind Oklahoma. I like SMU to win the game. I like Duke to keep it close. So it will be fascinating. A couple giant killers for you. Syracuse at Pitt. That's Thursday night. Pitt right now undefeated. Be careful. Some big games coming up that everyone's talking about with Pitt. Not included on that list is a home game against Syracuse. Houston hosts Utah. Utah's a mess offensively. They lost 3 in a row, and Houston has steadily improved. I already told you that I like LSU over Texas A&M. Couple more. Wisconsin against Penn State. Be careful. Be careful. They are a giant killer situation if you are the Wisconsin Badgers. Auburn's traveling to Kentucky. Auburn hasn't played great, but Kentucky last week, oh boy, not a good performance from the Cats whatsoever. And then finally, Mississippi State against Arkansas. Mississippi State, they got some things going in the right direction. Little bonus, by the way. Who needs it more? This is something that Kubiak came up with. USC hosting Rutgers or Utah at Houston. Michigan is also hosting Michigan State, and then Kentucky is hosting Auburn. So in order of needing it, okay, USC needs it a lot, but not as much as Utah. Utah is at risk of missing a bowl if they lose this game, whereas just a couple weeks ago, they were the favorites, the betting favorites, and I think court of public opinion favorites to win the Big 12. Michigan, if they lose to Michigan State, 5-alarm fire. But I'm telling you this, I kind of lean Michigan State. If they can not turn it over, Michigan State has been very turnover prone this year. If they can keep a clean sheet, I would not mess around if I were the Michigan Wolverines. I think Sparty can get that thing done. Kentucky heading in the wrong direction. Auburn, certainly don't trust them, but I still think that Auburn can go up there and get the job done because Kentucky, man, based on what I saw against the Florida tape, that was a tough one. A very tough one to watch. And then finally, USC, man. Like they got to, if you don't get this one, big problems as Rutgers travels all the way across country to take on the Trojans. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Encourage all of you to like, rate, and subscribe to the show wherever you get the show. We always appreciate your contributions there in the comments section here on the YouTube page. Those of you that leave us a review on the Apple Podcast page, we appreciate that. And for those of you that have rated us on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast, we always appreciate that as well. For all of us here at Always College Football, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.